All right, let's head over to the cloud for take two of our Landman Season 2, Episode 7 recap with Warren Martin. My name is Jason Spees. Warren Martin is with Kansas Strong. I, of course, am with The Crude Life, and it's been a planes, trains, and automobiles type of a thing. We have take two happening. Warren, this is my cell phone that I still cannot receive messages or do anything on, and I've got some weird things happening here, and I'm finding out that in modern life, if you're not connected, boy, I tell you, you can become disconnected real quick. So, how was your holidays? And we're going to jump right into Landman here. But how you doing first?
I'm still connected, man. I'm still connected, so I guess I'm doing pretty good. And I don't know, sometimes when you're connected, that's when you feel like maybe it would be better to be disconnected.
Well, I'm in a town I've never been in before. It's right outside of Dallas, South Dakota, called Gregory, like home of the ground zero of the pheasant. I saw there was a landmark. I'm going to go and check that out on the way out, back out of town. But Warren, let's get right into it because you know the way that this episode started off, episode 7, was that there's a lot of uncomfortables. It seemed like one of those slow moving episodes that I compared it to Breaking Bad with The Fly, how that was one of the least favorites on Rotten Tomato, but according to a lot of the publisher or the producers and writers, it was one of the more important ones in terms of advancing some of the storylines because there's so much interpersonal communication and dynamics going on, and that's where Landman has gotten. It's more about the relationships than it is about the oil and gas, and we'll get to that in a second. But I wanted to start off with the oil and gas stuff because there is some things in there. The more I was thinking about it after our interview yesterday, which is a take two, um, there's some inaccuracies that we should probably discuss right out of the gate. And um, they wanted to advance the storyline of wildcatting as a gamble and a blowout is bad. That's what I took away from this oil deal that's happening in the Gulf, Warren, because I don't understand what's going on. I thought I was understanding the oil and gas industry, and then this whole speech on what the gamble is and what the project is. I was very confused. So give us a recap again, take two of what your understanding was of that whole blowout in the Gulf and what they have to do and why this geologist is involved, and help me down on my confusion.
Well, I don't know that I help you down in your confusion because it's very confusing and because it's really inaccurate in some regards. I don't understand what's going on with this well that they're talking about. I agree with you. The show's really not about the oil and gas industry this season. Last season, every episode we were talking about different aspects of the oil and gas industry. And this season, we're talking about relationships and we're talking about inappropriate behavior. And so it really has made a dynamic switch. This episode really kind of showed how much that switch has taken place because there was a lot of effort to try and be accurate in the first season and show practical everyday things that people did in the oil industry that really gave them a home where they could say yes to their wives, to their kids. Yes, that's kind of what we do here, and they could have a discussion about that. In this episode, and frankly, in this season, we've gone more down the hydraulic fracturing. Let me rephrase that. We've gone more down the fracking road. And frack is a word that is used in the media. It's used in public conversation. It has a very specific meaning. Hydraulic fracturing. It's a process that takes place in the life of a well for 2 or 3 days, and that's it. And where you go in, you hydraulically fracture the rock, you implant sand in those fractures, opens up the flow. It's one and done. You're done, and you move on. But fracking as a term has come down in the media to mean everything that goes on in the oil industry. It's a catch-all statement that sounds bad. People all over the place when they talk about it. If you hear anyone give a speech on fracking, especially a high school student give a speech on fracking, they will all at some point say, "What the frack?" Why? Because it sounds like a cuss word. It sounds like a cuss word, and that's the way people use it. That's the way that the terms blowout and wildcatter were used in this episode. A wildcatter, by definition, is when you go out exploring for oil and new reserves where you have no idea whether there's anything there or not. You're taking a shot in the dark. But in this case, we're talking about a well that was already producing. And you're trying to re-drill the well that was already producing to bring it back online. That's not wildcatting. You know hydrocarbons are there. You know that they're there in producible quantities. Whether you can get it to produce again or not, yes, that's a gamble, but that's not a wildcatter. In the same way, we're told that the hurricane came through, damaged the rig that was on top of the water, but there was a blowout underneath. But then the geologist goes into how this blowout was spraying out water. And that's not a blowout. A blowout, by definition, is the release of hydrocarbons, whether it be gas or whether it be oil. It's a release of hydrocarbons. Yes, you can have other things that happen to a well. You can have a well bore collapse. You can have an impermeable layer that gets fractured and you lose your pressure on the reserve that you're tapping into. But a blowout, by definition, is an uncontrolled release of hydrocarbons from a well site. And neither of those line up with what they've been talking about with this well. So what's going on with this well? I don't know. I have absolutely no idea what it is. To me, it sounds like an entire scam.
And we'll get to the storyline of the perceived insurance scam here in just a moment, because actually, I think this season's more about an SNL scandal, probably be related to Enron and the too big to fail bailouts than actual, anything that's going to go to a refinery in this season. And specifically, I wanted to talk about just how they don't know. Like, there's a lot of confusion about whether this well will produce or not because it was before. Now they're introducing it like they don't know. It's a brand new gamble. A new dealer has come to the blackjack table. There's all new cards. You're sitting in the same spot, but hey, we took out the hydrocarbons below you. And I mean, in my neck of the woods where I got my jib, if you will, where I cut my cloth, was up in the Bakken in North Dakota, right in my backyard. And back in 1980, Art Link, the governor, took the state geologist, Laird is his last name, and they created the Laird Library up in Grand Forks, North Dakota, where the University of North Dakota is, because the core samples tell us where the oil and gas is. And so when the Bakken happened, it was farming. It wasn't wildcatting at all. They knew exactly where every hydrocarbon was within 90 to 100%. So when the $100 oil hit, Warren, it was a mad dash to go out and prove. That's the difference. Even though they knew it was there, they had to prove it. So I'm wondering, are they going to go down that line of the difference between what's a proven well and what's a not well? Because in North Dakota, I don't know about the Gulf of America and Mexico. I apologize. I'm not trying to trigger anybody. I just haven't got my memo from the American AP Association if we're going to do Gulf of America or Gulf of Mexico next year. I'm not sure where we're at, but I don't understand if does the tectonic plates below there shift, Warren? I mean, I understand that the Bakken isn't really a wildcatter. It's more of a farming operation, but talk to me a little bit about proven and unproven, because that seems to be part of the storyline.
Yeah, and you're starting to sound like the lawyer on the show. I mean, she had that exact conversation with the geologist, and they finally just decided just to call it the Gulf. Let's just call it the Gulf and leave it at that. So, but you're exactly right. There's a lot of misunderstanding about the difference between a proven reserve and known oil reserves. And most of what you hear is you hear people talk about proven oil reserves. And if you go and you look and say, okay, type in, when are we going to run out of oil? Well, that changes on a regular basis based on what the price of oil is, which is interesting. And the reason it changes is because proven oil reserves, that's a legal term. And you can only count as a proven oil reserves that you have that you know that you can pump to the surface. You can lift to the surface, and when you lift them to the surface, you can sell it and make money off of it. So As the price of oil goes up, proven oil reserves expand because we got some areas where you got some geological formations. It costs more money to lift them than it does in other places. When the price goes down, proven oil reserves diminish. That was changed under the Obama administration, and the administration was really trying to clamp down on oil and gas companies and investors being able to use their known oil reserves as collateral to borrow money to go out and do new activity, new exploration, and so on and so forth. So they changed that legal definition to where proven oil reserve is only oil you can get to the surface at current market value and sell for a profit. That's a proven oil reserve. That's very different than known oil reserves.
I'm going to interject right now because the timeline that you mentioned made a lot of sense in terms of with the Bakken oil field. Because in the Bakken oil field, it's within $20 basically from the core to the outer region, maybe $25. That's $60 to $85 region type of a thing, and the numbers might have changed since I've last looked, but you get the idea. And so when it was up to $100, $100 oil, they were basically just popping a hole in the ground, proving it, and then capping it right back up again, because they were going to wait for the price to go back. Because then it's farming. It's all farming. As soon as the corn prices go up, plant corn. As soon as the wheat prices go up, plant wheat. And according to Johnny Cash, when the wheat prices went down, they lost the farm. So it's tough to follow those prices, but in the Bakken, that's kind of what happened. And then in 2016, that's when a lot of the Bakken locals started going down to the Permian. They started going down to maybe the mid-continent, or even if the Marcellus had some gas capture opportunities. So what you're talking about, I saw firsthand in my backyard. And so getting back to Landman, using proven resources as an asset to leverage more money to take care of all of the daily Landman incidentals, I think is where the storyline is going, Warren, to become one big insurance fraud scandal behind the scenes to expose what's kind of holding up a lot of the oil and gas industry. Because if they're focused on trying to cover up and out litigate people, that's a tough road to go down if all you want to do is keep gas in the car and keep some plastic bags from getting in the ocean. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. And I do want to differentiate, known oil reserves. Known oil reserves is more stable because it considers what all the oil that we know about on Earth. And so when you talk about when are we going to reach peak oil, when are we going to run out of oil, you have to base that off of known oil reserves, because as oil, if it becomes more rare, right now it's not becoming more rare. We're finding more and more of it. We're getting access to more and more of it. But if it becomes more rare, then the price of oil will go up. As the price of oil goes up, more of those become accessible. Going back to what you're talking about, the Bakken, and comparing that to Kansas, Kansas is one of the oldest oil fields that there is in the United States. And as such, the entire state has been drilled. We got core samples from all over the state. There might not be another state that's as well documented as far as geologically what's going on as Kansas is. And that's very different than what's happening out in the Gulf of Mexico, or the Gulf of America, or the Gulf. There we go.
See, it's hard, isn't it?
Hard.
Your trigger goes in and like, okay, who did I just offend there? Sorry.
So out in the Gulf, you don't have core samples where you got 5 core samples from every square mile in the entire region that you're looking at. You're relying much more on seismic data. You're relying much more on imaging. And the one thing about it is unlike Kansas is a very inactive state when it comes to fault lines and it comes to tectonic plate shifts. The ocean, the Gulf, is much more active. It's still not majorly active, but it's much more active. So what we find is out in the ocean, you're able to identify, yes, there's oil here, but that doesn't mean it's producible. But in this case, they were already producing. So your probability of repeating that is much higher. Now, is it possible that an impermeable layer has fractured and the gas has escaped to a different layer? That's possible. Is it possible that the formation you were in, you sucked out all the gas that you could get out of that pocket, and there's no gas left in that pocket that will flow to your well bore? That's possible as well. So, it is a risk. Even if you go back to a well that you've already drilled and you've already proven and you know the oil is there, there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to bring that well back online. But your probability is much higher to bring that well back online than it is if you're truly wildcatting. You go back to 1915s, a wildcatter in Kansas would hit 4 out of every 100 wells drilled. That's what a wildcatter was doing, 4 out of 100. We've improved our technology, but even with all of the mapping and all of the core samples that we have here in Kansas, you're barely above a 50-50 chance when you go out and drill for oil here in Kansas. You're going to find oil because you have a pretty good idea where to look. That doesn't mean that it's going to be in a reservoir that is producible, where you can afford to get the oil to the surface, lift it to the surface, and sell it and make money off of it.
And just to give the listeners an idea, the different shale plays, even or the different oil plays within each other, can 20 feet away can have different geology, and so it's so price point. In Alabama, there's a oil field called the Tuscaloosa, and it's very muddy and clay-like. And this was 6 years ago. They were talking $90-$100 before they could even do anything in there, just because of trying to figure out how to make the geology work with you instead of against you, because it's difficult at times, let alone the actual transportation and the construction, and having to build a little city in the middle of nowhere because there's no power out there, and you got to get power out there. And I mean, it's quite a logistical deal. I'm not sure exactly where these other storylines are going, Warren, but I kind of had an idea. And
Before you do,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go there, I just want to kind of go back to where we started. And so in wildcatter, when they throw out that word blowout, to me, it really came across as throwing out fracking. You're just throwing it out there, not really talking about actual hydraulic fracturing. You're throwing it out there to cover a big gloss. And the two things that they threw it out there to kind of cover is that massive damage can be caused. That's blowout. Massive damage can be caused by a mistake that happens underneath the water. And two, they threw out wildcatter to really say that the oil and gas industry is a gamble. It's a risky. You're taking a bet. It's no different than the casino. And let's be clear. The oil and gas industry is a high risk, high reward industry, but it is far more technical than it was back in the 1915s. It's far more technical and a lot more precise. And I wish they were a little more precise in their language in the show.
Well, that's the part that I had a problem with, is that they were trying to say that the drilling is the biggest gamble, when actually it's more of this boardroom stuff that's the biggest gamble. It's more of this executive level gambling that's going on, because most of the oil and gas industry, between the compliance departments and between the petroleum geologists and the Laird Library and the Kansas Library and all these other historicals, like, it's almost farming now, because most of the stuff is known or proven. And when that happens, the gamble becomes, okay, how much are we going to be able to control? And Warren, I used to joke that the greatest oil company in the world is basically a file cabinet down in someone's laundry room with the oil leases, and that's it. Because that way they just get paid and there's no risk, that type of a thing. But for every layer of risk or every element of the supply chain that you add under your own umbrella, the profits are exponential. Therefore, it makes sense to actually have an oil company. But when you take a look at everything that's involved, the reason they went with Landman is because a landman essentially touches almost every single step along the way. Yeah, he hands it off a little bit at the executive level and he hands it off a little bit at the petroleum geologist level, but he's touching them. He's touching them. And so he's got some insight. And one of the storylines that's probably going to be pretty uncomfortable, and I don't know if it's going to be a gender storyline as much as a owner employee or maybe both, but the two females in the show, they wanted the easy one line answer. What's the percentage? And is it a good deal? And Billy Bob just keeps saying, this is complex. Stop. Stop. This is complex. I actually think this is one of the bigger storylines, that so many people are trying to simplify one of the most complex industries there is, and they're throwing around billions of dollars on a gamble. That to me is actually a legit storyline. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that he's walking a precarious line where he does make it look like women are much simpler in how they approach this, and that exact opposite is true here in Kansas. I know several women that run their own companies, that are high up in their own in the companies that they work for, and they're incredibly brilliant women. That they are the most detail oriented people that I know here in the industry. One of them leads one of our member associations here in the state right now. She's the chairman of the member association here in the state, and they're highly detailed. I get emails from them all the time with nitpicking and little details that they want to make sure that I understand and clear, and help me clear things up and help me move forward with my projects. And, I think it would do a great disservice if the show continues to go down the road where these two ladies, the lawyer and Cammie, Demi Moore's character, where if they go down that road where they are simplifying everything and trying to get it down to the one line answer, because that's not the experience in the oil industry, and that's certainly not the experience of women in the oil industry here in Kansas.
I noticed that where in the preview, when they do the recap show, I always pay attention to that because that's really what they want you to remember from the last episode. And they made a point to have Andy Garcia's character, the head of the cartel, do his very, very good deal. And Cammie just smiled and said, that's a good deal, isn't it? And of course, Tommy, and I should probably step back for a second because one of the issues that I think the main character, Billy Bob, Tommy Norris, is struggling with is that he understands the cartel's intention and where they come from. And that's the difference between the cartel and an oil and gas company, because an oil and gas company is not trying to get you hooked, is not trying to get you beholden to them. They're actually trying to empower you. At least that's how I was brought into the industry. They're trying to empower you, not bring you down. The cartel, for example, gives you a little bit of pot, gives you a little bit of cocaine, and all of a sudden you want some heroin and you want some meth. And then eventually, if you can't pay, they just slug you and move on. And that's what Tommy's thinking. And Cammie doesn't look at it that way. Cammie looks at it like, oh, okay, investor, perfect. My husband entrusted him. I should too. I actually think that's one of the bigger storylines being told, and I don't know if this is on purpose or if they're going to come to a head with it, Warren, but let's clarify that a little bit, at least for the industry folk and those people that maybe want to know the difference between what a cartel is and an oil company, because they're trying to put those two together.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right on track there. The difference is the oil and gas industry is for the betterment of humanity. You look at the development of the oil and gas industry, it coincides with increased life expectancy, decreased infant deaths, decreased the lowest point in history of climate-related deaths, increased gross domestic product for any country that utilizes it. And the more they utilize it, the better their highest wealth of any of individuals in the world and at any point in history. Everywhere you look where fossil fuels are used, it has improved humanity through the products and through the energy that come from hydrocarbons. hydrocarbons. That is what has led to the life that we live, the society that we live in, and the improving of humanity across the board. I mean, the definition of energy is the ability to do work. It is that energy and the products that come from it that allow us to do work and do it in a safer way because of the products that also come from it. That's very different from the cartel. And they keep trying to compare the two because of one thing only, money. Yes, it's high risk, high reward in the oil and gas industry. So if you make it, you tend to make it big. You tend to make big plays and get big reward for it. But that's very different than a cartel that goes out and, like you say, all they want to do is give you product, give you experience, give you opportunities in order to get as much of your money as they possibly can out of your hands and into theirs. And then once they've done that, they discard you and you're left off in a worse place than you were in the beginning. Those can't even begin to be compared except for one concept, and that is it has to do with a whole lot of money.
And one of the ways that oil companies can go off the rail or they can become expensive and need additional financing is some of the actual storylines that they're getting into that are extremely uncomfortable for people because they exist in every single industry, not only the oil and gas industry. And that's when you start involving romance, sex, flirtation, and contracts, and all these different things. Listen, I'm from the media. I mean, it's there ain't nothing new under the sun there. And so when you start seeing two people that are getting chummy together, and all of a sudden that person starts getting a little bit more access, there all of a sudden their name comes up at the meeting. Pretty soon they're getting a contract. It doesn't take much to figure that out. And the one storyline that I think is very interesting, and I'm going to see where they go on this, because Nate or Nick or whatever they're calling him, what's his name? Nate, right?
Nate's
And
his name. He calls him
yeah,
Neil.
Neil, that's it. Yeah. The lawyer who's supposed to actually kind of be the father figure at the end of the day, keeping an eye on everything from a legal standpoint. And by the way, he's one of the best characters on the show. He's without him, you don't have as much humor. Somebody needs to be the vanilla in order to have Rocky Road. You can't do it otherwise. I mean, think about it. If he wasn't there, Angela would seem a little bit more normal because the rest of the people are just ridiculous. And so he's there to actually prove a point. And look at what he did. He saw that somebody went from Charles to Charlie. He called her out on it. She deflected it, dug her heels in, moved on. He came back and called her out on it. She got caught. To me, that's one of the bigger storylines, where how often do we lie first, and then when we get caught, what happens after that? Now, they handled it by Billy Bob kind of doing what I believe a lot of people do, assess the situation. Are we in harmless stage right now? Okay, let's nip it in the bud and see what happens. That's kind of how I took that, Warren. This is one of the more dangerous storylines that they're going to actually introduce, because I can actually see husbands and wives fighting over this type of a storyline. Your thoughts on the whole introduction of now Sex in the City and the C-suite executive room?
Well, I think that we talked about it in the last episode that she knows nothing about what's going on in the Gulf, but she already chose her geologist that has never drilled in the Gulf. So obviously there's some favoritism to being shown there, even if he is a genius, even if he's, you still, we build our industries, we build our companies based on experience. And even if you see someone that's ingenious like that, you couple them with someone who has experience to make sure that they're on the right track. And so we saw that favoritism that began to be played out. It does happen in the workplace in all industries at different times. There's always that one person that the boss likes more than he likes everybody else, and they get favors even though they do less work. There's little things like that that happen that, if not kept in check, can really get out of control. And I think you're right. I think Nate is really kind of on that track of where he pointed it out. He's the vanilla he brought in. But I also think there's a little tweak to that. And that's when Tommy went and talked to him. Billy Bob Thornton's character was talking to him about where else is she going to meet someone? This is what we do all day long. But he made a statement. I don't remember exactly word for word what it was, but he basically called Neil out. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you're concerned about the company? Or are you doing this as leverage against her because you feel threatened for your job? And he kind of made that implication there. So it could be a storyline that goes two different ways. One about a relationship and how it can harm a company or impact a company, may be a better word. And the other is how people use situations like that to advance their own careers.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is what a landman does. He goes to the source to find out where the intention is coming from, whether it's a hydrocarbon or an emotion. How's that for a tie-in? We're doing okay here. We're doing our best, folks, to keep this on the storyline of the oil and gas industry. Ward Martin here with Kansas Strong. My name is Jason Spees. We're doing our Landman Season 2, Episode 7 reaction show here. And a couple other storylines I had written down here that I think are going to probably come back that I do think are oil and gas related. And then we'll get into Sam Elliott and Ali Larter's characters, which are more about the family dynamic in the oil and gas industry. We'll get to that here at the end. But there was a scene about some employees, rig hands, roustabouts, whatever language they're using in the show for the modern day employees out on the well. And it seemed like there was some sort of entry level or street level cartel interaction between the oil company, MTEX, and the cartel, where they spun out, kicked some rocks up on some people. And it was just kind of there. I mean, there was, and if they never go back to that, that was a wasted scene. There was no point. So obviously they were foreshadowing something. And I think it's going to be something with the cartel to come back. But the reason I bring it up, because I wanted to talk about the other storyline, which is an oil and gas storyline that probably should be discussed. And it's one of those where it gets looked the other way until it can't anymore. And if you're kicking up rocks onto somebody's car with a company car, that's supposed to be a violation. You're not supposed to be doing that. And the way that Tommy has used the MTEX truck to do all of his personal errands throughout the show, and the way that these employees are using their company cars to do everything, which from driving to a funeral to, I mean, you name it. I don't know if they did that or not, but you understand what I'm talking about, to where this is one of those things that's a privilege and a benefit that the company offers an employee, but it's so normal now that I think a lot of employees have actually lost track of that. That when the company emblem's on the side of their vehicle, technically they're not even supposed to drive to the store. They're supposed to use their personal vehicle to drive to the store and come back with their groceries. But the oil and gas industry was the first one to say, you know what? They got bigger problems. So it's one of those fine lines again, and I'm wondering your thoughts on that, Warren, because again, a lot of companies allow it, but a lot of them they can't. They can't, because of, if you kick rocks up on someone's car, the company gets sued.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely pervasive, definitely not isolated to the oil and gas industry in any way, shape, or form. Over the past 15 years, maybe 2 decades now, the IRS has regularly updated their code on travel and transportation and benefits through a company and what you have to claim, trying to get rid of that. Or trying to, if not get rid of it, if you take your truck and you go down to the grocery store and you come back, that should be counted as a benefit, as in compensation towards your employment there at that company. And so it definitely, the IRS is not cracking down on just the oil and gas industry. It is pervasive across all industries everywhere. But I think that a lot of people do lose track that when you're in that truck, when you're in that vehicle that has the insignia on the side, that's a company vehicle, that you're not driving as a independent driver. You're driving as a representative of that company, and that company is liable for whatever you do inside that vehicle and with that vehicle. And I think that is very much lost on a lot of people that do have access to company vehicles.
So I am curious to see if that kicking of the rocks, because I noticed after they kicked the rocks up, boy, they made sure they showed that logo on the side of that truck. So we'll see what happens. But transitioning into the Sam Elliott and Allie Larder Angela storyline.
Can we go? Can we do one more?
Yeah, yeah, please go ahead. Whatever you want.
Because where they were going was they were going to a backyard barbecue.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, let's go there. Yeah.
And so where they're going is backyard barbecue. And again, this is another attempt by the show to try and create an idea that's not necessarily, it is in the oil and gas industry, but it's not necessarily pervasive across the entire industry. And that is these rig hands all get together, these roughnecks get together, and they're having this barbecue, and they have a conversation about getting out. And the whole conversation was about getting out and putting together your nest egg and getting out, much like a gambler at a casino. And you ride the cards, and when you make your money, then you get out, you leave. And otherwise, you're going to lose everything. And so you got to get out before you lose everything. And again, it's this idea that the people that work in the oil and gas industry, all they care about is getting in, making a bunch of money, and then getting out as fast as they possibly can. The one exception to that was a geologist, and they asked him, is he going to get out? And he was like, no, I'm addicted. Again, comparing to the idea of an addiction. I'm addicted. I'm a treasure hunter. And that's exactly what he is. But the usage of the word treasure hunter in movies and in across the board, anytime you're talking about treasure hunter, you're always talking about some eccentric, crazy person that has this outlandish idea, and the movie is a hit because his outlandish idea actually worked for once. And so it's again that pervasiveness of this idea that people don't get into the oil and gas industry as a lifelong career. They just get into it to make money. And that, again, is not my experience with the people that I work with here in Kansas, where you got fourth and fifth generation individuals that are continuing to run their companies and be a part of those companies. It may be a lot more pervasive with investors that are trying to invest in some of these wells and trying to invest in some of these companies. It may be more pervasive among lower employees in the industry, the rig hands, the roughnecks that while they're young and able, they're jumping in trying to make some quick money, but then they want to get out and find a career somewhere else. Those are both understandable. But in the industry itself, there's a lot of people that is their life.
And we're talking about the foreman of the crew who received a watch, the traditional retirement watch. And after 20 years, you kind of get one in the industry. And then you go and, like Warren said, you made your money and you go. And they're really, to me, when they did that, that was more about setting the stage for what I believe is going to be an explosive season finale. And yesterday, when we were kind of pontificating a little bit about where these storylines are going, because this was a very slow burn of an episode as they were getting ready for things to take off, kind of that down before you jump up on the trampoline. And I actually believe that they brought this character in to knock him off, to get an emotional jar out of us, in the same way that, death happens in industry, whether it's oil and gas, which we're talking about here, or like I've mentioned I grew up in agriculture, and that was the number one dangerous industry my whole life. And so when we're talking about, the storyline, yesterday, Warren, I said that I believe there's going to be an incident with Sam Elliott, spoiler alert, and this other gentleman, the foreman. So I actually think there's going to be 2 deaths before the end of the season. One is the foreman who's retiring. So they're going to do the Danny Glover, oh man, if I could just tell retirement and then take him out. And then the other one is Sam Elliott, who I think was brought in for the emotional jar, if you will, of the season. And yesterday I pontificated to you whether it be a accident on a rig or if it'd be the cartel, kind of pow-powing, pew-pewing him type of a thing. You had a different angle on that, and I'm going to let you talk about that for just a second because I think that's where we're going. I think we're going to the emotional buy-in, the star status of Sam Elliott. He hasn't really been used to his ability, so it almost seems like he's more of a sacrificial for the brand, if you will. But again, I think it's going to be an accident or some kind of gunfire. Where is your mind?
We're talking about Sam Elliott. We're talking about the foreman.
Both, actually.
Okay.
I gave two predictions, and I actually think they're going to come together in the same. But go ahead.
Okay. Well, I agree with you on Sam Elliott. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to happen. They've alluded to it a couple times now that where he's hard to wake up, and the classic setup for foreshadowing his death coming. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to happen. On the other side, though, I really have been. I don't know what I said yesterday, but I've really been thinking about the foreman, and I've been thinking about what you were saying with the rocks kicking up. I think it could possibly be neither an accident on a rig, nor the cartel. I think it actually could be something in the middle where these guys that have these cars, they come after the two guys that threw rocks all over them. And as often happens in the oil industry, the rig crew stays together. They all support each other, and we have a big fight, and he's killed in that fight defending his crew. And so I kind of think we might be moving in that direction.
Okay, then I've got one more because I thought about it too. And I thought I'm going to put my two together because I think what's going to end up happening is that there's going to be an accident on a well site, quote unquote, accident on a well site, and it'll be Jacobs, the young one who's spent the whole season getting married because his character is the only one with any oil and gas experience in real life, and they've wasted his whole season getting him married. Sorry, didn't mean wasted, but in the terms of what we're doing here and talking about, because he's the guy who's got the knowledge and he's not out there. And he's the one with the company that's supposed to be running and all these different things. And they haven't done anything on the company. It's supposed to be like Beverly Hillbillies, man. Everybody's rich and we're moving out of town. Get the vittles. And yet they've just been focused on establishing him as an old-fashioned, ethical man. Not a boy, but a man. And so I see his rig getting sabotaged by those rock kickers, and Andy Garcia is going to love it. He's just going to sit back and orchestrate the whole thing because it's all an insurance scam. It's all a money scam. It's just destroy that well, move the money. Destroy that well, move the money. All kinds of that's where I see it going, Warren. I actually think they're going to elevate this out of oil and gas to oil and gas 2.0 and get the S&L scandals and the Enron and all that stuff wrapped in here. Go ahead.
I have no. The chips are on the table. We have our bets down, and we'll see where it heads. But there is a third option that we haven't even considered yet, and that is that it goes absolutely nowhere.
That is true.
I mean, because at the very beginning of the season, Tommy made a deal with a guy for $400 million, and not another word's been said about that deal that was outside of everything else that they're talking about. Not another word in the entire season has been said about that deal.
Well, the season finale, episode 10, we're on episode 7 right now. Episode 10 is called Tragedy and Flies. So my guess is there's going to be a tragedy happening in the series, or the season finale here, because they've already renewed season 3. Let's talk a little bit about just the family dynamic as we wrap down here, because that's the one thing. As much as they're trying, and as outrageous as it is, and as much as the main female character Angela is nauseating, which Ali Larter should get an Emmy for, because if you can actually pull that off, I mean, she's just fantastic in a way that makes you sick to your stomach. And so At the same time, though, Sam Elliott loves her because she's trying to bring positivity in a weird ass way, as long as it's on her terms, into the family. At least it's something. At least it's a start. It's not bickering nonstop. I liked your prediction yesterday with Sam Elliott and Tommy Billy Bob, where they were going to get into an altercation at one of those dinners, and he would have a heart attack in front of the family, and everybody would hold him accountable. Which actually, I was thinking that's probably the number one chip I'd put on the table if I was a betting man right now, Warren, to be honest. But the family dynamic, that's what I'm kind of taking away from all the chaos and all the nonsense, is that we all have our own messed up families. And in the oil and gas industry, you've got all these different personalities living under one roof. And when you start bringing someone's family in, it changes the dynamic completely, to where the guy who's used to getting coffee, he's taken off now. He doesn't want coffee anymore because it's too scary. It's coming with the, I don't know, whatever side of Angela comes with it. So there is that a little bit about the infusion of the Martha Stewart into the oil and gas home. Doesn't quite work as well. But just your thoughts on the whole dynamic of the family, how they're trying to do it, what's failing, what's succeeding.
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right on the dynamics that are there. Anyone who's had kids and seen those kids grow up and leave home, come back home, leave home, come back home, you know, anyone that walks through that door that stays for any length of time changes everything about what's happening in the home. And you know, we started out last season with tons of scenes with three old men that were walking around a house, and how that has dynamically changed, where there's no one ever alone in that house now. And so those dynamics, I think, you know, that's where the show gets it right. I think that's where they're getting their viewership increase that they're getting is based on those dynamics. And so I think that, you know, that is one area they get it right. Even though I can't stand Angela's character, I think they get that right.
That's so funny. And I always remind people that the movie Titanic, the lead villain, Billy Zane, did such a fabulous job that he would get booed when he'd come out and do interviews, and he never could get a job after that because did such a good job. So sometimes it's it's not, it's just because you're so good. Like I say, Ali Larder, and you know, some of these characters that are just like that. Man, that's hard to do. Like to pull that off. And there is a little bit of that entitlement and untouchableness that does exist in the oil and gas industry. And so it's interesting how they're bringing it in more through her than through anybody else. But nevertheless, there wasn't much on. In fact, Demi Moore's character wasn't even in this episode, and Sam Elliott, not much there. And so we're kind of just waiting to see, Warren. I think we're going to probably speed up. I think the last 3 episodes, we're going to have a lot more oil and gas activity on the well site because that's where the action is. And right now we're getting, as we get to the final parts, you know, car explosions and oil rigs explosions and cartels. That's when the season finales come into play, Warren. So I think we're going to speed up a little bit on that front. What's your thoughts?
I hope so. I hope we're going to be up on that front a little bit, but no, we've been working this deal, or they've been working this deal in the show for the entire season. It's got to come somewhere, whether that's to a courtroom or whether it's to a rig out on the ocean. There's got to be some type of conclusion to that. You can't carry that storyline a whole nother season. You got to move on from that. You're exactly right. Cooper's wells that he's got, we haven't seen anything on those in a couple episodes now. So something happened on that. And the cartel has been completely absent except for behind the scenes. And what's the point of having a cartel on the show if the cartel can't be the cartel?
So, folks, you're going to want to stick around next week because I have a feeling it's going to be a barn burner and a slobber knocker. I think we're going to have some interesting storylines to discuss actually in the industry as well, not so much in the boardroom and insurance scandals. And so actually, I think the insurance scandal is going to get even more interesting as we kind of continue on here, because that is a relatively new storyline with a lot of the different mainstream storylines. There's not too much on that. So, well, any final thoughts here as we kind of wrap her up today, Warren?
No, I think that the second take on this was much better than the first. I think we were, it was probably a blessing that the first one wasn't recorded, because we kind of walked away from the show thinking, what in the world does this have to do with the oil and gas industry? But looky there, you brought it around and we made it about the industry.
We did okay, and you know what? We did hit about half of it yesterday. With the library and some of the other areas and the insurance. But I'm actually glad it worked out the way it did, because having an extra day to kind of really think about, okay, what did this do for the industry, and how is, because at the end of the day, this show is one of the bigger platforms for the industry for the next generation, whether the industry accepts it or not. It's happening. It's there. It's out there. So if people are saying blowout and wildcat in the wrong way, that's partly paramount. That's why we're here, is to help correct. So if you know anybody, send this to them and do all that different stuff. I don't ask for subscribers, Warren. I've never been trained like that. Everybody always tells me, you got to ask for subscribers. And I'm going to be like, but that annoys me when people do that. So why would I do that?
I think you just did that.
You figured me out. All right. So we'll see you next week, folks.